This is not Terry Gross, and this is not Fresh Air. In 1982, I did not talk to George Lucas about Star Wars. So here's a special Star Wars The Last Jedi edition of the Shrink Tank Podcast. And welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Shrink Tank Podcast. I'm Dave Verhagen here in Nashville, and we've got a great show for you. We're going to be talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi, and I'm going to say right off the bat, if you've not seen it, don't listen if you don't want spoilers. We're going to talk in detail, so do not listen until you've watched the movie. So let's go ahead and meet our Charlotte panel. And of course, first up is Dr. Frank Gaskell. Frank, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you,
All
David?
Right. I am doing well. So as our resident Star Wars expert and geek and adherent to the Star Wars religion, give us your first impression of Star Wars Last Jedi.
I walked out and gave it an A, but now as time has passed, it's an A+.
An A+?
It is, yeah, it is now my second favorite Star Wars movie of all time.
After what?
After A New Hope.
Oh, wow. Okay. So after the original.
Yeah, it's right in there with Empire. It's basically tied for second.
I'm going to come back to you about that because I definitely want to talk about it. Emma Kate, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Emma Kate Wright is a psychologist, and she's on our panel. She is not as big a Star Wars nerd as Frank, but you are a fan, I would say. Is that fair to say?
I am.
So what's your general take on the movie?
I'd give it an A. I thought it was great.
Except for that minus the 30 minutes you were asleep.
Well, right.
Is it asleep or passed out?
I may or may not have been asleep for 30 minutes during the show, but every part that I saw, I loved.
Did you have some enhancement for going to sleep?
I may have had some libations prior to visiting the theater. It was a holiday party.
Yeah.
I was sleepy.
And just to be clear, you guys all had a party before the movie. You rented out the entire movie theater, 269 tickets, and then took all kinds of friends and family to see the movie. So it was an event, right?
It was.
Yeah,
it was
a
crazy.
blast.
Now, I've been to the last two that we've done in Charlotte. Now I'm in Nashville, and we had our own little event with about 60 tickets, not the whole theater. But how was the energy in the room for this event, by the way? Just out of curiosity. Was it as before?
Oh, yeah. It was ridiculous.
Awesome.
People are freaking out.
All right, and Jonathan Hederly is here. He's our certified Asian, and he's a licensed professional counselor. And Jonathan, you are as close to a bona fide film critic as we've got. Tell us what your take is of the Last Jedi.
Well, after seeing it, I really loved it, and I've actually seen it a second time now. I just last night saw it in IMAX 3D, and I still love it. I think the film is greater than the sum of its parts. I don't think it's a perfect film, but I would probably give it an A-, and I could be talked into a solid A, but overall, I really love this movie.
So I am on the side of liking the movie, but I don't think I love the movie. I would give the movie a B+. I'll explain that in a minute. I think the third act of the movie was a solid A. Loved the finale. The whole third act was outstanding. Getting there was a little clunky for me, so we'll talk about that. All right, so let's go around and let's talk about what you did love about the movie. You guys are all in the A+ to A- range, so we'll start with you guys around what made it that great for you all. Frank.
I think that there are a few things. One is, and I didn't really come to these conclusions until after and talking it over and reading online, but this is not the Star Wars movie for Star Wars fans. It's not about that. And it's somebody said it's almost as if a young George Lucas, this is what he could have made. But the other part of it that really, Hederly said it best, that the sum of the parts is better than the whole. Wait, what'd you say? The whole's better than whatever. Whatever, however that phrase goes.
Sum is greater than its part.
Yeah, the ceiling is the roof. And the time when Kylo says, basically, let the past end, is what this is one of the main things this movie is about. The past is, stop worrying about who Rey's parents are. They're nobody. Snoke is a nobody. And all our heroes have fallen. They're gone. And now let's get on with this. And I think that's that idea of your heroes failing and becoming more complicated is just fascinating to me.
I love that theme. That's one of the things about the movie I really like. And I think the line from Kylo Ren was, "It's time to let old things die." And Yoda made a similar comment. And the whole movie thematically was it's time to let the past be the past and let's move on to new things. And I like that. I think on that level it succeeded. From a storytelling standpoint, I feel like they were cramming too many things in the beginning. Some of the storylines seem kind of unwieldy and clunky, but where it landed was really strong. Like that's the part I loved about it. Emma Kate, how about you?
So this is kind of a random fact, but I love the new little porgs. I think they're so cute because I loved BB-8 when he was introduced, and I actually did some reading, and apparently the porgs actually came out of necessity, where they were filming in Ireland in these protected areas, and there were all these puffins everywhere, and they couldn't move them, and they realized it would be easier to film over them. So then the porg actually became this really a big part of the story. And my favorite scene is this one scene with Chewie where he's about to eat one of them, and it was just I liked some of the little comedic moments that were thrown in there.
I wanted to see if the porg were Chewie to Chewie.
Oh,
we never got to see that.
And so that means porg is Dave's favorite bird.
It is.
Because they're puffins.
Yep, the puffin is my favorite animal. So yeah. Now the porg is my favorite sci-fi animal. Jonathan, how about you?
Well, I think you guys have already touched on thematically. I think this is one of the most ambitious Star Wars films because it expands the rules that govern this universe. And to me, finally, it wasn't just talk or exposition. They just showed it. Like it was an actual cinematic experience. They kept saying if you strike me down, I'll be stronger. They show it. They don't just sit around explaining the Force. They show the Force, and then they don't feel the need to explain everything away, which really bogged down the prequels. I think visually it's the most ambitious and one of the finest Star Wars film in terms of pure cinema. I mean, the shots, the color palettes, the scenery, and there's a lot that I think Rian Johnson took from even the inspirations of George Lucas, like Akira Kurosawa and his old Japanese samurai films. Like even Snoke's soldiers or guards, they have definitely a Japanese samurai sort of feel to them, and the colors are similar to some of Kurosawa's late films, but even the theme of breaking down tradition, so the traditional samurai in Japanese versus the Ronin, which was a samurai without a master. I mean, that's really what Kylo Ren is saying. I don't think it's a perfect film. I think particularly the side plot of Finn, Rose, and the casino I thought was the low point of the film.
Yeah, I agree.
Think it suffers the inevitable second or third film fallacy, which is usually in the first film, most of the protagonists are together. And then in subsequent films, oftentimes they split up and they have separate storylines. And I think when you talked about Dave, it feels crammed. That's one of the things that suffered because they also introduced so many additional new characters. But I thought Luke and Rey was strong. I think everything with Kylo Ren was the high point, and I'm really glad about the decision they made to get rid of Snoke, so that it really is now he is the central villain or antagonist moving forward.
And it was a pretty emotional film for me as I thought it through, because when you see Luke's X-wing in the water, okay, well that's gone. Goodbye. The lightsaber, Luke's saber, that's gone. That's Anakin's saber, it's gone. And just watching Luke decide to die on his terms with the two sons, saying goodbye to that, I felt a little bit like I was saying goodbye to my childhood. That this is a significant break from that period of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, I agree. I think that all that stuff is really strong. And everything that Jonathan said about the strength and the weakness of the movie, that whole storyline for me with the casino and Finn and the what was the girl's at Rose? Was that her name?
Yeah.
And them running into Benicio del Toro. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Big time actor, Oscar winner. And it was a total disposable part. I mean, maybe they'll do something more with him next episode, but it was a waste. And that whole storyline, and I guess you could tie it in thematically to say, where they were going with it didn't pan out, and that's more about you have to fight for what you love and not against what you hate. That's kind of one of the other themes of the movie, and so the people that were kind of on this mission to blow up this thing or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could tie that in, but to me, I felt like that was the kind of thing that made that middle section not work well for me, and it kind of lost me emotionally. And then I got re-engaged back in the final act, which I loved. And I think it succeeded. Ultimately, it succeeded exactly with what it wanted to do, which is out with the old, in with the new. We're starting afresh. And that's a good thing. Emma Kate, how about you? Any other thoughts?
Well, I mean, it is kind of interesting to hear Frank's perspective, and just in the sense that he grew up on the original trilogy, and others, you all did too, and I did not. And so I do feel like there has been kind of a clash from what I've been reading with, hardcore Star Wars fans and then others. And so I'm almost just wondering, what you all think about whether or not it is kind of this generational difference about which series or not series per se, but which acts of the Star Wars chapters you grew up on.
Well, I think the expectations for this film were so high because Force Awakens was made for Star Wars fans. That's just what that was. And I think once you've got your mind set the way a Star Wars film should be, and then it doesn't go the way you expect it, I think some of these fans, they just get real rigid and hold on to what they believe should have happened.
That's true, because I remember they did make Rey's parents out to be a big thing, and then it was just kind of dismissed in this one.
Rian Johnson definitely made a movie that asked and answered questions that he was interested in rather than feeling beholden to the framework that J.J. Abrams had laid out.
Right.
And if you look at J.J. Abrams' career, I think the guy's brilliant, but he's great at starting things, and he's not great at bringing them to a conclusion. So if you look at whatever franchise, Lost, Star Trek, you name it, that he's picked up, he's really good at the start or the reboot, and then it's up to other people to take it from there, and sometimes with varying degrees of success. And I think this is a good example of a director who basically like, okay, you've dealt me this hand, and I'm just going to play it in a totally different way by cashing out. Like I'm dumping the hand essentially. And I think that was okay. I do. I think for the long-term health of this franchise, this was exactly the way to go.
It worries me that he's doing the next one.
J.J. Abrams?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'm
I really
nervous.
feel it's going to be a step down on all these levels because I agree he's super talented and he's got a lot of strengths, but you already picked up one of his areas that he's not particularly strong, which is sticking the landing at an end. But the other is when you think about Rogue One, when you think about The Last Jedi visually, from even the camera point of view to movement of the camera. Even Rian Johnson did some really cool things in this film where he had just a second of slow motion that immediately went into full speed, and just those small little subtle cinematic touches that he had. And then Gareth Edwards with Rogue One, the scale to where the camera was pointed with the AT-ATs. Like J.J. Abrams, I think, lacks some of those little subtle nuances so that it's a really good overall experience, but in terms of a point of view, I don't think he's as strong in. And this movie was just so beautiful to look at and to watch.
Well, and I'll tell you, the thinking, I can't wait to go see it again, but I remember in the trailer seeing those ships going after the AT-ATs. I know they're not called that in this movie. And the red dust coming up or whatever that was.
That
I thought,
was awesome.
Why on earth would they do that? And then, I can't remember who it was, steps out and scrapes his foot on the salt and uncovers the red underneath. When Luke walks out, he leaves no footprints. And that's like a clue right there, but that all came together. And with Luke wearing his black clothes when he went after Darth Vader and had his trim beard, he looked like Jedi Luke.
Yeah, and he had his old lightsaber, which we knew had been destroyed.
Yeah.
Like there was all these cool, subtle touches.
I thought it was very good. One more thing before we wrap up. There's another theme that came out of the movie, and it is sort of an answer to a question. I guess it is an answer to a question. One of the central questions going in was who are Rey's parents? And Kylo Ren basically answers that in a very sort of, not, I won't say offhand because it was in a pretty powerful scene, but in a way that just basically dismisses that question. But what it does is it opens up a bigger theme, which is that greatness in this upcoming, I don't want to say trilogy, this upcoming series is really going to come from humble beginnings. We see it with the little kid on the casino planet. We see it with Rey's backstory. This idea that you don't have to be born of greatness or born of, it's just sort of like coming from humble origins. Any thoughts about that, Frank?
Well, yeah, it all began with a slave, and that one child slave led to everything we've seen, and it's amazing when you look at the entire story arc of how people coming from nothing lead to these amazing accomplishments.
All right. Well, there's more to talk about, but we were going to wrap it up. And I think the consensus for all of us, our grades range from, sounds like A+ to B+, but kind of the consensus is definitely go see it. It's well worth your time. If you've already seen it, we'd invite your feedback and comments, and you can interact with us on Twitter at @shrink_tank, or look for our Facebook page, or also on shrinktank.com, there's opportunities to leave comments there as well. So we hope you'll interact with us about the movie, and we'd love to hear from you. Our producer and music composer, Sean Beck. For Emma Kate Wright, Jonathan Hedderly, and Frank Gaskell in Charlotte, I'm Dave Verhagen in Nashville. Tell all your friends about us and make it a good week.